Hi, good morning. I am Lakana. I could say that our speaker today and I will match online. It all started last in the late 2018 when OHEC, or Office of the Higher Education Commission, thought of the future of internationalization. And then we sought for the futurists to work with us under the Fulbright Specialist Program. Through rounds of application selection, I happened to learn that it was not easy finding the right person with extensive future experiences. With our efforts by BICS, Bureau of International Cooperation Strategies, and the Fulbright Thailand, we Googled and got our speaker's email from the website. That was the beginning of our connection. After waiting for some hopes and anxiety, if he was interested in working with us, finally, I got a yes response from our speakers today. The connection has begun. It was the first time working with the futurist who has extensive experiences as consultant at the well-known companies and agencies like Kellogg Company, Dow Chemical, as well as NASA and General Motors. It made us very exciting, yet full of curiosity. We work with university executives, stakeholders, and experts in order to understand context and be able to identify gaps for further strategic actions. Yes, employing future perspective and tools were needed. Through a series of meetings, workshops, and interviews, we could finally draw the key issue influencing the future internationalization in higher education. May I proudly present to you our speaker, Dr. Andy Hines, a futurist, a workshopper, a speaker, and a thinker from University of Houston to share with us his perspectives on is this future still our futures? Andy Hines, please.
Sorry, one more second, and here we go. All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come back and speak with you a year later and see how we're doing. I thought the booklet came out wonderful, and I'm very pleased that we were able to put that together. So thank you for that. So let me talk first a little bit about the study. So we did it a year ago, and I think I'd like to just kind of highlight some of those issues, but then spend most of my time talking about the big question: how has the pandemic influenced not only our issues, but maybe the future in general? Of course, the study focused on many issues such as internationalization abroad, and of course, maybe even more important now, internationalization at home. Can I pause for a second? How is this? Is the sound okay? Okay. Okay. I hope that all of the audience here today would agree that internationalization is important. Of course, that's the first thing that we did in our study, was to reaffirm that we agree that this is a good thing to do in the future. First thing we do, right? Okay. And I think what I hope that I could bring to your group was some of the very basic toolkits that futurists use to study the future. So some of you might remember what we call our domain map of the topic. And we said, in order to understand the future of internationalization, where should we look for change? So you can see that we have, I guess, 8 different topics that we use to organize our investigation or exploration into the future of internationalization. And to pull together what we I guess our exploration, we use 4 tools. The first one was called horizon scanning, and that is a sort of a bread and butter basic futures tool for how do you find the signals of change in a topic area. So that's kind of the fundamental first step of almost any futures project. How do you you got to find the change, right? That's the first place to start. We did some trend analysis, and the trends are useful to a study of the future because they are already happening today. They are not made up. There is evidence. They are real. We can measure them. We can see them. They are tangible evidence of a future, a basis upon which the future will emerge. So trends are very tangible. Whereas the horizon scanning, sometimes as we all found, some of the ideas were a little bit less grounded, but they gave us, but interesting nonetheless. And we also did several interviews and site visits. And then we pulled all that together into what we call emerging issues analysis. And so what I was hoping that we could do with this study is to help the team identify some issues that it should be thinking about for its next strategy. And we use the term emerging issues for that, okay? My favorite little tool for thinking about or framing emerging issues is to think of the issues in different time frames. So the future, we say, the future is it's useful to think of the future in 3 time horizons. The first time horizon, you can see first horizon, it's on the y-axis where it says strategic fit. And that means, how well do we understand what's going on? How well do we understand what's happening in our environment? And the first horizon, hopefully that's basically today, in the next 2, 3, possibly 5 years. Ideally, we understand that pretty well. So strong strategic fit, we hope. We also, today, right now, if we do our homework, we can identify potential issues in the second horizon. We won't see them as clearly as the first horizon, but we can see them nonetheless. And what we have learned from most organizations is they're trying to understand what are those major potentially disruptive forces that are going to change how our topic operates today. So Horizon 2 is where all the interesting change happens, and there's often many competing forces. And you can, when we look at the issues that we identified, you can see most of them were in that Horizon 2. Okay. Now at the bottom you see Horizon 3, and that's the very long-term future. We say that when we're scanning, we look for signals of how the distant future might be different. We can see many different signals, but it's very hard to tell which one of those are actually going to become useful and real to us. So a lot of times we don't spend too much time on the third horizon. It's interesting for long-term change, but I can tell you most of the time we're focused on that second horizon. What are the next major disruptions? The other thing to keep in mind about the third horizon is it can help us get a sense of where do we want to go. So, when the next iteration, the next type of internationalization emerges, what does that look like in the long term? Okay, so we use the 3 horizons to frame our issues. And there's a kind of a nice little shorthand that we use to think about those time horizons. So in the Horizon 1, from out to the year 20, so the next 5 years, 4 or 5 years, it seemed like for that time frame, we were mostly, in terms of internationalization, we were mostly focused on how are we doing? How well is it working? Are we happy with what we're getting? Now, I can tell you that, while yes, I think the answer was yes, You can see in Horizon 2, there was a lot of discussion of, all right, since we're doing what we're currently doing well, what should we do next? You can see we had 7 different issues to think about in terms of what should be the next priorities for internationalization. And it could be all of them. I think what we wanted to do was kind of give a menu of possibilities. These are what we think will be the major issues of the next 5 to 10 years. All right. And then finally, so Horizon 2, what should we do next? After we've done what we're currently doing, what should we do next? And then Horizon 3 gives us this idea of, all right, where do we want to end up? What are we working towards? And so those are some of the more long-term visions or aspirations for internationalization. You can see we had we had 4 different ideas about what the long-term future might look like. Okay, so that's basically how we organized our current issues, right? Now we get to the next question that says, now that we've had this major disruption, how does that influence our approach to these issues, if at all? Of course, the first thing we had, I should mention that first, once we developed our issues, we then developed a set of strategic recommendations that says, all right, so if we agree that these are some useful issues for us to be thinking about, what might we do about them? And you can see the basic format that we used was, what do we do in the short term, phase 1? What do we do in the medium term, phase 2? And what do we do in the longer term, phase 3? So one thing I hope that you get from this whole notion of looking at the future is that the future it really is multiple time zones. And that we want to focus, we look to the future ultimately to come back to the present and say, what can we do? What should we be doing today to get ourselves working towards the future that we want? Okay, so we kind of go back and forth between these time horizons. So how has the pandemic influenced not only the future of internationalization, but the future in general? And so I've been doing this work for 30 years now. And I say rule number 1 during a major disruption is don't panic. I don't know how many of you have read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's a wonderful series of books, and there's actually a TV series. So if you haven't seen it and you like the future, you might enjoy it. But it opens, the first words of the book are don't panic. And the way I want to tie that back is having been doing this work for 30 years now and having gone through at least a half a dozen very major crises, the thing that we know is we will get through it. In the beginning, there's a tendency among the folks involved to think like, oh my God, everything is going to be different forever, and there's a sense that this will never go away, and that everything will change. And what we've learned is, yes, for a period of time, things will be very different, but ultimately, our systems will adapt. So don't panic. Okay. Rule number 1. And in terms of like, well, did futurists in general, did we know, why didn't we see this coming? Well, we did. And I'm not just saying we futurists, but many, many, many experts saw something like a global flu pandemic was almost inevitable. So I went back to some of the old work that I had done. And here's a 2004 report on a global flu pandemic, which when we read it through, it's like, oh my gosh, it was almost described what happened almost to the letter. And that's not because we're smart or anything. It's because it was obvious that something like this could happen at some point. Now, we didn't know when, but we knew it could happen. And that's one, I would just like to say that that's one of the benefits of futures thinking is when you study the future, you look at the possibilities, when something happens, you're not surprised. Even if you didn't know when it was coming, you're not surprised. And then that goes back to when you're not surprised, you're less likely to panic and make bad decisions. So that's what we say is one of the benefits of horizon scanning, you won't be surprised. Okay. So far, I've pulled out 3 lessons, I think, from the pandemic that, again, relate to the future and to the work we've done. So let's jump into those 3 lessons. The first thing is, don't try to figure out how is the pandemic going to turn out. I got to tell you, we don't know. Nobody knows. A lot of people think they know. A lot of people say they know, but nobody knows for sure. So what we say is, rather than trying to guess how the pandemic is going to play out, think about the major patterns of change and be ready. Be ready for however it plays out. We don't have to guess right, but let's be ready. And what futurists have figured out, more or less, is there tend to be 4 typical patterns of change. So the first pattern is things go back to normal. Well, that's not looking so accurate right now, but it could happen. It could happen. It could go back to normal fairly quickly. Not looking too, all right. But that's the thing that happens. One thing is things go back to normal. The second pattern is a collapse, and that is still possible. You know, the global economy, things get worse with the virus. The global economy shuts down. That is a possibility. Let's go to transformation at the top. Transformation says we will reinvent a whole new approach to public health. We will transform the way that we deal with something like a pandemic or global health issues. Not likely, but it's possible. It may happen. And you see, the one I'm leaving for last is called new equilibrium. In my experience now, having gone through 6 or so of these major crises, this is the most common pattern. And what it says is there will be long-lasting changes, but not fundamentally different from the current system. There will be some things that will change, but there will be some things that will not change. There will be some things that will go back to normal. And so one way you might think of this is what we call the new normal. There's a new normal, but it's not so different than the old normal. So like after the Great Recession, there were some things that changed, but maybe 5 years later, it was like, well, it's not that different. At the time, though, it seemed, oh my gosh, right? So the most common pattern to a disruption is there are some lasting changes and there are some things that don't, that, if you will, return to normal. And the reason for this in systems, and we try to think of these patterns in terms of systems. Systems prefer not to change unless they have to. So the odds are with let's make we'll change as much as we have to, but we don't want to change more than we have to. Okay. And so what we would say is, rather than trying to figure it out, you'd say, what would be our response to each of these 4 possibilities? And then you're ready. Okay. So stop trying to figure it out. And, like I said, there's a possibility that there is significant, long-lasting, major shifts in how we do things, but probably not. Probably not. What tends to happen is some issues will go faster. Some things will speed up. Some things will slow down, and some things will stay the same. And that's one thing I wanted to look at in terms of our internationalization issues, right? So I went through the 14 issues that we identified in our study, and I found that 4 of them are going faster, 4 of them staying the same, and 6 of them are probably going to slow down a little bit. And when you look at the ones that are going faster, it all has to do with online, virtual, new formats. And it makes sense, right? I mean, doesn't that make sense? That those issues are now, in a world in which we cannot travel and move around, virtual online stuff becomes vitally important. And so we had, I think, we had three issues that touched directly on that theme. And I think those issues right now should move to the top of the agenda. But notice, a lot of things weren't affected, or not affected much. And a lot of things, they just become a little less important during this crisis period. Okay. So it's mixed. It's not everything changes, nothing. It's usually a mixed set of changes. Okay. The second lesson in a pandemic, and this is like, what does good futures thinking do during times of disruption or crisis, is we think of downstream consequences. And I know some of my colleagues will remember we used the futures wheel tool. And when their change happens, such as in this case, our COVID-19, the first order means that's the first consequence. The first thing we did is we quarantined or shut down, whatever you want to lock down is the word we often use. And that was the initial response. And most thinking stopped there. We didn't think once we shut down, we're done. And a futurist says, well, if you shut down, what happens next? And of course, what did happen next? People lost the economy slowed down. In the US, 36 million people have lost their jobs so far. Okay. What happens when people are stuck indoors for a long period of time? They don't have jobs. Number 3, social unrest. I mean, if you really, it's almost an obvious thing that was likely to happen. I'm showing you the picture of up in the nice state of Minnesota, where the people are supposed to be really nice, right? They set the police station on fire. So what we would try to encourage in good futures thinking is don't just stop at the obvious first order thing, but think about, if we do that, what else happens? What happens next? And what happens after that? That's good futures thinking. Okay. The third one is, we call it, don't decide until you have to. And it might almost seem a little counterintuitive. You would think futures would say, decide the future as early as you can. We actually say just the opposite. Don't make a decision until you absolutely have to. Because the longer you wait, the better the information you have to make that decision. So if you make a long-term decision immediately, then you're locked into that long-term decision. New information comes available that actually might say that decision wasn't such a good one, and then you're in trouble. And what we recognize is sometimes being decisive is seen as a very, a good leadership thing, and waiting and waiting for new information, monitoring is sometimes it's seen as indecisive, but it's actually a good decision strategy. Let's not decide until let's at some point we have to decide, but let's try to get as much information as we can. And so really quickly, one of the projects I've done, I started and finished since I left you guys last year, was for our U.S. Forest Service. We identified emerging issues, just like I did with you guys, with you all. And but of course, these are forest-related ones. And when we developed a system that said, let's monitor the issues that we identified and actually see how they're moving over time. Right, again, future is always, it's always in flux. Things are always moving. Things are always changing. So we developed an approach. And I don't have time to get into the details, but we developed it's kind of like a scanning approach that you all are familiar with, but it's a scanning approach for specific issues. And we identified how are these issues emerging over time, so that now we have a more nuanced understanding of our issues. They're not all the same. Some are going faster, some are going slower, some are staying the same. And I think that in that way, we can make decisions that are more based on what's actually happening. And that, I just think that's a better way to make decisions. As much information as you can. Okay. And, it's funny, I don't know, this may be something that's old news to you in Thailand, but in the US, one of the big new movements is, using the forest as as sort of a medicinal health retreat. And there's this forest bathing has turned out to be a very big trend in the US, where your doctor might suggest you go spend a day in the forest as a way to heal yourself. And it's been a very big movement in the US. And we're watching that, right? So we're watching those things emerge. Okay, so just number one rule, don't panic. And hopefully that's because you've been watching the future. You're not surprised. You knew something like a pandemic could happen. You just didn't know when. And then when it does hit, you say, we're not going to try to figure it out. We're going to identify the possibilities and keep our eyes open. We're going to think about downstream consequences. We're not going to just stop at the first decision. We're going to think of what happens next. And then finally, we're going to kind of watch and be responsive and not make those decisions until we absolutely have to with the best information available. And so in terms of our set of 14 issues that we identified last year, as I mentioned, there are 4 that seem to be that move to the forefront. And again, they all involve this, they're all based on the fact that we can't move around anymore, or at least for a while. And so how we teach, how do we adopt new learning formats? How do we shift to online? And finally, the one that's a little bit different, but I thought was interesting, was since China has appeared to come out of the pandemic faster, does that mean it's going to be even more influential? I mean, the U.S., we're still we're still confused over here, so we're just out of the game right now. So that we thought that might be something to think about as well. So again, I guess the short answer is yes, this is still your future. It has changed a little bit, and let's address those changes, but we don't have to panic. We're going to be all right, and we should keep on the path that we charted out last year with these mild sort of tweaks to our strategy. Okay. So with that, I will hand the microphone back over virtually to Lakhana and who's ever next.
Okay. Thank you very much, Andy. I sure have a lot of questions, and I think that Dr. Nokrainu will have a lot as well. But before then we have the second speaker. When we were planning of this virtual event, we were thinking of the second one. And at first, because this concerns Fulbright Thailand cooperation as well, so we were thinking that maybe the second one should be more or less an alum from Fulbright, and you too, Andy, are our alum. And even though you have been working extensively in industry, we think that another one in Thailand could contribute best as well. So we were trying to identify it, and the first one that popped into our mind is this guy. And you know what, Andy? This guy once worked with the Dow Chemical, so you might have met sometime in your dream or some past. And our second guest speaker has the entrepreneurial mind, and his background is in chemical engineering and graduates from US Davis. We only offer masters then, but he managed to get his PhD from UC Davis, and then he also had his postdoc from MIT, and also went to Stanford. You sure went around a lot. And what I was very impressed was then I visited where he is working now at True Digital Park, and it shows a lot about our development in our country in terms of the nurturing of startups and also the understanding of international partnerships. So he fits in well with this concept of our ICN, internationalization. And besides, it's really very strategic and result-driven. So it's my honor to really introduce our Fulbright alum who I am always proud of, Dr. Tharit Niman Wuttipong. So I hand the mic virtually to you. Please.
Thank you so much, Kapitip, and hi to all the speakers and all the panelists. I'm honored to be on this talk, and I actually have been talking on a lot of stages, but not quite on the futuristic side. So this reminds me almost one company that I have in our campus, which is FutureTel, the future labs of MQDC. So they are thinking about how would the future looks like, and they are trying to formulate a strategy in order to cope with that, and then work with the public sector and also private sector a lot. So that just resonates me a little bit about what I'm doing here. So as Khun Phornthip said, right now I'm at True Digital Park. So we are trying to build, let's say, the new hub that would be acting as a reskill and upskilling hub for the future, because we see the future will be different. I mean, the key theme of this talk is the future still our future? And my explanation or my presentation right now focus so much on the viewpoints as entrepreneur, right? So I prepared quite a short deck that I would like to share with you guys. I have just a few slides. Cannot compare with how Dr. Andy has presented. So I hope everyone see my screen. So basically, I just want to throw in some fun facts which are not so fun. So from the left side to the right side, look at what is happening in the world right now. It's very, very messy. So more than 75 million people could be replaced by machine and algorithm by 2020. This is a job changing. This is a disruptive change that a lot of people have been talking about for quite some time. And actually this is amplified during the past few years because of the digital transformation wave, even before the pandemic wave. Then the second one, right now, since 2 months, 3 months back, the COVID hit us very hard, and more than 20 to 40 million, I recall that Andy said 36 in the citation, something like that, has lost their job already. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And this could be the irreversible effect as well, because the job will be replaced by machine, and the people start losing job right now already. So it's very, very worrisome on this aspect. And then, so how would the world respond to that? Another fact, I think this is from the Harvard Business Review, only 6% of the adults, the workforce in the world, can have the caliber to solve the problem in the environment that is technology heavy. So are we ready for the future? I don't think so, if we base on these statements. Okay, how about we move to the right side? Look at Thailand, our country, our proud country. Since the COVID hit, there are 4 sectors that got hit hard by COVID. Retail, of course, because it's locked down. People cannot go out and spend money to shop. Actually, shopping is like one of the key things in Thailand. So if you cannot shop, basically everything is dying. Second thing, hospitality and tourism. Of course, it's contribute more than, I think, almost 20% of Thai GDP. And it has been cut to 0 during the past 2 months. Third one, manufacturing is locked down. They cannot go out to the factory and do things. And the fourth thing, the transportation, the airport got shut down. So with this effect, it puts more than, this is the number from the desk research, more than 37 million workforce in immediate risk of losing job, of losing money, of losing salary. And then it affects their, the second order would be the family, the third order would be probably the overall economy of Thailand. And so I work a lot with startups. So I can say that more than 80% of Thai startups are struggling so bad right now. So we have one word in startup world, it's called runway. So basically the runway is how far can you still survive without earning any investment? How can the company survive? It's probably really, really short, a couple months, and then they go bankrupt. This is the real situation. This is what's happening right now in Thailand. And then I want to draw your attention to the third column. So because this talk is for MHESI, so it focuses on higher education. So what are the implications? I just want to throw in a few facts. Right now, we have about 370,000 unemployed people. Still find big challenge to land a new job, even before COVID happens already. And then with the COVID, it makes 10 million Thai workforce in the immediate support. They need upskill, reskill, and job matching right now. So that makes the total possible pool of the talents that cannot find job up to about 10.1 million. That is very worrisome, right? And then in the future, the university going to produce approximately 330,000 graduates every year. No, actually 500. And then 330,000 of that will still have a mismatched skill because the job landscape changed a lot, the market changed a lot, the new job will be replaced by robots. So when you put all these pieces of information together, it's you can see the future going to be changing a lot, quite dramatically. So am I convinced that everything going to be back to normal? I mean, maybe 10% or 20%, but there's a good chance that the thing will never be the same. I mean, some of them will go back to normal, but the things that matter to our lives, I don't think it will go back to the same. We need to look at ourselves. We need to look around, our system. We need to look around our infrastructure and ask ourselves a lot like, are we really ready for this future? I don't think Thailand is. We are so unstable right now and we are not so ready. So I don't want to I don't want to just flag the problem and don't have the answer for you because some people have thought about it already. So these slides, I just see this diagram from the World Economic Forum blog. I think it's quite famous actually. A few years back, even before the COVID, it talks about the 21st century skills, which I think is very much applicable for, the post-COVID or post-lockdown period as well. This doesn't change. So from the left again to the right, we categorize the skills that each individual would need in order to survive, to be competitive, to find job, to be up there and be proficient to spend their lives. Foundation literacy on the left, competencies in the middle, and the character qualities on the right. I just want to invite you to think along with me. So these days, I can speak for Thailand only. These days, I think Thai education system focus so much on the left side, on the first column, the foundation literacy, the entrance examination, all the intensive courses, all the students want to go to crash courses in order to excel the test scores. You can read the slide faster than I read for you. And then it comes the last few years that, the alternative schools focus on the middle one. There are a lot of courses online about design thinking, critical thinking, the UX UI design, how can you communicate well? And then there becomes like a new job, like a life coaches, and there's going to be a new curriculum that teaches people outside of university, and they focus so much on the competency. So would the combination of the first column and the second column sufficient for the future? Probably okay for the short term, but you can also see that the first column would be very much replaced by the robots. It's very easy, it's very systematic, it's very routine. The second one, maybe. I think it's always good to have the critical thinking. It's always good to have creativity. It's always good to have communication skills. And you need collaboration and partnership these days. My question is, are universities including these competencies in their curriculum? Do they want to equip their students with these competencies? And where in the existing curriculum that these skills will be taught? That's the first question. And then it becomes the discussion on the third column, the character quality. Again, you can read it faster than I read for you, but you can feel probably the same as me that these skills are probably not taught anywhere but in your family, from your intuition. So if you're born with it, you win. I mean, if your family teach you, you're gonna get the character, these characters. If your siblings have these characters, you probably imitate them. You really got it. So, but there's nothing in the university that teaches these skills. So it's very interesting that, if you want to write the curriculum for the future, how would you design it? Because the job landscape changed a lot already. You cannot focus on the left side. Would you shift to the right side? Would you do the balance between the three? Would you probably try to profile different profession and map with these? What are the weights you want to put on each columns? I think this is a very interesting point that I really want to invite you, especially the people at MHESI, to think about. And this is my last slide. So I just want to leave with the three thinking on the top of my head right now. So with the future blurred, we cannot say anything about it. We are not sure about where it's gonna head to, but we know that it's changing. We know that we are not ready. So what I think the education sector, especially the higher education sector in Thailand, must think about is first, the demand supply of talent going to mismatch a lot, and it's going to be amplified. This scenario going to be amplified a lot. But you know that it takes time to fix the education system anywhere in the world. Thailand is no exception. And I mean, it's very obvious right now. You cannot fix everything. So you need to prioritize well, really well. So you can use a framework that, Andy mentioned about, look at the short term, medium term, and long term, and try to prioritize that. It is a must. We must do that. The second one is that the new batch of students will see the market environment. These days, it's very transparent. They can have the access to every, knowledge or every market insight in the world. So they know what would the job market needed from them. But and then they're gonna know that they're not ready. So they're gonna look for the curriculum that equip them not with the knowledge, but equip them with the best chance to land a job. And the third one, and then how would the school and university react to that? The school and university will adapt for sure, because they're gonna see everyone adapt, but probably copy each other. They will probably try to solve the same problem, and then you're gonna have the new normal university that offer the same curriculum and produce the same kind of students. And that could be the pitfall of this, whatever future forward thinking all about in Thailand. I mean, we must not, fall into this trap. I would encourage that each university, each school must find a unique value proposition, create a signature curriculum in order to be known for the different, curriculum that they can offer, different chance that they can equip the students with. And then the coverage will be spread out all over Thailand. And the university can also run a sustainable education business, because, from the entrepreneur side, you cannot just do the social enterprise, right? You need to run the sustainable business. And with this online, classes and stuff like that, it changed the business landscape within a given university a lot. You need to think about the business side of the university well. And then with this, I think if we can really do it quick, we might save Thailand. But if not, I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. Is the future our future? I have no idea. But I know one thing, we are not ready. And that's my closer. So I just want to hand it back to Khun Phornthip.
Okay, thank you very much. At first, when I was assigned to do this job, we were saying that everything will be chill, sabai. So right now is the time for us to chill, and then as if we were in our own living room, and then talking about the future of Thailand from different perspectives. Now I got a message from Wesley Teeter. It's very interesting to think about the pace of change within internationalization, from slower to faster, depending on the specific area. It's a great insight and tool for analysis. So with us now, I have the Vice President from Mahidol University to join us as the inquirer. So maybe I could start from Dr. Noprenu to pose some questions, pose some challenges to both Andy and he.
Okay, good morning and good evening, everyone. Hi, Andy. We met earlier last year, and I'm glad that we get a chance to meet up again. And สวัสดีคุณ Tharit นะคะ Okay. Well, before I will raise any questions to both of you as presenters. Really have to thank both of you for the great presentations on the thoughts of the future of internationalization of higher education, especially in Thailand. And on my part, like Pitip just mentioned, I was tasked to also share some thoughts and also pose some questions to both of you. Before firing out some of the questions, I'd like to share with you a little bit of the insights from the institutional perspectives on higher education, on internationalization of higher education in Thailand. Well, as a policy analyst myself, I tend to look at things as a whole process of policy process. And when I look into internationalization of higher education in Thailand, I always thought about three levels of analysis. The first one would be the formulation of internationalization policy at the national level. And I think Andy has already mentioned a little bit about that. I think it goes together, these three processes, these three stages of policy process. The formulation itself, I think the internationalization strategies must be formulated at the national level. And before now, I would say that we rarely see very systematic formulation of internationalization policy for higher education institutions from the national level. But I'm glad that at least it has been gradually emerging over the horizon, to use Andy's word. We are starting to see those efforts coming along, either through the ministerial committees and along with some other national committees. And I would really have to give credits to the Office of Higher Education Commissions for being a great facilitators in those committees. So I think those initiatives and those national policy agendas has already been there. So that is a good thing for Thailand. The second stage that I'd like to mention here is about the policy implementations, because once you formulated those strategies, the main question is who will be implementing it? And definitely it would be the institutions, higher education institutions. And I think the key word here, maybe even before COVID or after COVID, is how we as higher education institutions are going to cater the so-called internationalization experience, how we are going to package it. Taking into account what Andy mentioned in those 8 domains of internationalization, I think everybody totally agrees with those domains. Some might add some other domains in, some might mix and match, pick and choose, well, based on the institutional policy and also available resources of each type of universities. I think Andy has already been well aware of the differences of the type of higher education institutions in Thailand. So I think in terms of implementation, it depends on how us as a university will mix and match those kind of domains and package it into the internationalization experience for our staff and also for our students. That would be the thing that I think in terms of implementation, higher education institutions would be the key players along with the national governments. So I hope that both actors at both levels will be working together to create a better recipe for internationalization for Thailand. The third one, I think it would involve what Dr. Tharit just mentioned, because when we talk about the outcome or output of the policy, of internationalization policy, Andy raised a very good question, whether or not we should be measuring the success of internationalization from numbers. We have been doing that for a number of years by counting the programs, counting the number of students. Even now, we are still doing so because of the league tables that we have to report the numbers of inbound, outbound students. So That is a very good question. If we are not going to measure it from numbers, how we are going to measure it based on other qualitative parameters, especially students' competencies in dealing with multicultural settings, or the ability of our students and staff to solve real-world problems with multifaceted angles based on their experiences gathered from internationalization policy at the national and institutional level. I think Kuntarit will be able to address more on this. What are the expectations from the private sector, from the business sector, in for us as an institutions to package the experience for our students, to make sure that these students will be able to work with the business sector in the future. So I think for the outcome level, for the outcome stage, the business sector would be most important in terms of addressing the needs, what kind of skills that internationalization should be incorporated with our curriculum, our research experience, and also mobility programs. So I think these are the areas that I'd like to share my thoughts. My questions are scattered along the way, and you would see that both Andy and Kuntarit will be able to address in accordance with what I shared. So I think, Pitip, if you allowed me, I think Andy might have some responses to some of my thoughts, and also Kuntarit would have some thoughts as well, especially on the outcomes.
Sure, yeah. So whoever would like to start, please. Andy, you want to?
Well, I guess I think the framework is a good one: formulation, implementation, and outcomes. And you know, those were certainly, as you mentioned, those were themes that we covered in a slightly different fashion in the work we did last year. I did want to say that the work that we did do was very much a collaborative effort. So, because I am not an expert on internationalization, you guys taught me well. But you know, so all I really did was bring the Futures tool to your community to kind of, you know, put it all together. I mean, I think what you said, I would just agree. I mean, I don't see anything that you said that didn't make sense. Yeah, so those were some of the same themes that we identified in our work, and yeah, I agree that you could be a little more systematic. It could be we need the institutions to take ownership along, you know, help with government, and we need to, as we specifically address, the outcomes need to move away from the easy numbers base to our, you know, are we qualitatively really making a difference? And I totally agree with that.
I could allow me to jump in here for Andy, because when we talk about numbers, then right now many leading universities and even Macy, they call it Macy. Macy here also focus quite a bit on ranking. So when we talk about IZN, it seems that people want to talk about visibility simply to answer to ranking. So in your opinion, what do you think about visibility for IZN?
Well, I think rankings can be a useful thing because it gives, you know, it provides a target. I think it provides a focus to effort. I think one thing that we've probably witnessed is that they can also sort of distract from the ultimate purpose, right? That to some degree, you can become overly focused on the rankings and forget why, what's the real outcome they're trying to get to. You know, we've seen that in even work with students, right? That they become all focused on getting the right grade and passing the test, and not really learning the material that is going to help them in the real world. So I guess, you know, I think any ranking system can be useful, but always be careful that it doesn't, you know, distract you from, it's a tool, it's a means to an end and not the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like that very much. Because whenever we talk about numbers, it seems that people focus a lot on ranking when not all the universities need to be on the ranking race. And Tarit, anything that you like to share further to what Ajahn Nobrenu said?
A few things, but first on the ranking, I think it really depends on how the business side of the university looks at it. I mean, it's for sure if you at the higher ranks, the money, the endowment gonna come in, the students gonna be more interested in your university, and then you move the wheel. So basically, like you will have more opportunities to develop further. You will attract the private player to work with you. So I think in that respect, actually the ranking matters a lot. But the problem that I could see from my 2 cents is that when the top of the, let's say the policy layer eye the ranking as a target, how would it cascade down to the working level? How would it cascade down even to an individual professor or teacher level? I think it needs to be really clear that how would the smallest person know how they contribute to the highest KPI of this tree. And I think that it's very hard problem to solve. I mean, no question asked about that. I mean, in the corporates, we also have the same, because if it's top down, at the very bottom would never know what's going on with the top and why it's set to go that way. But for more agile, so the wording agile, the more agile, a lean company, more like a flat company, they would understand, because it would be like 1 or 2 layers down, and then everyone knows what they're doing. So it's a fundamental problem. It's a systematic problem, which is very hard to solve. But I think it actually matters, ranking. On the other points, on the business collaboration, on the output that could not break those. I think the connection between the policymaker and the end user of the outcome from the policy are not well connected. And you can see that the government has been trying to solve this problem by initiating some program like Pracharat, that and the PPP initiatives, because it forced public and private sector to come together and make something happen. And that is actually the way. And if it becomes natural that the policymaker listen and involve private sector heavily, you can see the real outcome, and your KPI gonna change, and the entire system gonna be more productive. It's gonna be more resultful, I think. I think that's my view on that.
Yeah. And you have anything to add here?
Just a little bit on IZN and ranking. I think we have been discussing about this for quite a long time in several circles, that we should not be interpreting IZN or internationalization as solely for ranking. It's like, well, from the institutional perspective, I would always say that it's like Janus face, Roman coin, that internationalization is presenting itself as both ranking and also the packaged experience that I mentioned earlier. So I'm not saying that numbers are nothing, because at the end you still have to really consider ranking as one of the points where you position yourself against others. So it is a good way to monitor yourself, and is easy for laymen to understand where you are as an institution against other people. So ranking is one side of the coin, and the other side that we should not be forgetting is how we are going to package the experience of our students and our staff, because we are accountable for their experience in the university, and how we are going to incorporate internationalization into every facet of our core business. I think that's the things that higher education institutions and also the national government and also every stakeholder must take into account, that we are not going to choose between numbers or qualitative parameters, but we really have to incorporate both into the thinking of how we are going to project internationalization policy at both national and international, national and institutional levels. That's what I thought.
I also think that what Dr. Tharit said has several keywords. The first one is the connection. That means the proper relationship between the policy level and then university level. Policy, that means national policy. And we have the big gap. So if both know their proper roles, it will be much easier for us to push the ICN and for the university to really see their deployment process, how to make it more systematic down to the individual to understand. One more keyword that I find a little bit sensitive in the education sector, if not properly thought out, and that is the business side of university. I would think that the word business side, other people could mean only generating incomes by having ICN as the tool to have more international students when we can, or even online and when we can earn it. It doesn't mean it is for commercial purposes only, or maybe off the balance. What do you think, Andy, and then Bang, and also even he, about this point, the business side?
Sure. I can say from my own experience in teaching in our program, because it's been virtual for several years, that we've always had a mix of international students in our programs and in the classroom. And there's so much benefit from that to directly hear from people who are experiencing another culture. So and we've also done that in our research projects. We work virtually as well. So I think there are very tangible benefits. Now, how we would translate that into a ranking mechanism, I don't know. But in terms of a packaged experience, it's just absolutely wonderful, and it works, and you can do it virtually. It can be challenging from a time zone perspective, but we've kind of we take turns being inconvenienced, but the benefit is just it's worth the cost.
So that means virtual programs work, so we could try and then do more.
Yeah, look, I'll be 100% straightforward that if I could get everybody, all my international students in the same room physically with I would prefer that. But it's not practical, and so therefore we've had to learn how to do the best we can with virtual. It's not as good, but it's better than not doing it.
That's true. That means it can't be replaceable.
It's not a replacement.
Okay, yeah. There is one comment from Dr. Rong Yen. Recently, it is witnessed that more universities have set world ranking as their vision. Emphasis so much on ranking, it overshadows real meaning of universities' existence. Any idea about that?
Yeah, I just really quickly, I would just say same thing. I think that we get maybe a little too infatuated with rankings. If we keep them in the proper perspective, it's a way to make sure that we're always evaluating what we're doing, right? Are we doing the right stuff? Are we doing well, right? But to not be too enamored with it and lose focus.
Yeah, I think I already answered this question already a while ago, and I think that the key point is to balance between the two. Ranking is one of those indicators that you can make use of in terms of research development, education development, or the redesign of your curriculum. You can use some of those indicators. Yeah. So
right. I think it's good for benchmarking or some of the learning about the good practices. What about Tharit? What do you think? Looking from outside, coming into universities, seeing universities are racing to ranking?
I think it depends on who you are. I think ranking matters to certain groups of people. And I think rankings in order to show to certain groups that they are higher. I don't think ranking is for everyone to digest. I don't think a lot of people care about ranking as well. But when you are talking about people who care about ranking, those people matters to your university, I think. So, I mean, from the entrepreneur perspective, I think that when you lay out the KPIs, I think you have to balance, just like Dr. Nobre. But you need to have this, dedicated person in charge that looks after this ranking, because you know in your heart that it matters, but you also know you have to balance and say that it doesn't matter 100%. But so you need to dedicate a manpower in order to look at this matter like deeply and try to address it anyway. I mean, I don't think that you can compromise not to care about ranking and focus on the other thing just for the sake of balance, and then lost your business at university later. Just imagine this. So the viewpoints from the kids in the future, they're probably not looking for the top university of the old ranking anymore. They will look for the university in their own ranking, which I don't know how would ranking will look like, because I mean, some university gonna go out of business, maybe if they are not, carried by the government. And what's gonna happen? I think you need to be ready to think like future forward thinking about this, and then formulate the very sustainable long-term business model for the university. I've seen some of the very innovative way of constructing a university. There's one alternative school in France called Eco 42. Actually, Eco 42 is something that KMITL has just brought to Thailand. It's a coding school. So basically, their business model is that they receive the funding from the private sector, like an endowment, maybe companies like Google, Facebook, those guys. And then they use that money to formulate a curriculum and give it for free to the students. So, this way, what's happening is that they can keep the free education. That's one nice thing about it. People can look at it as a very good brand. Secondly, they can feed these students to the companies right away. So the placement is 100%. So no one lost, they don't need to compete even. And the third thing is that the university is sustainable itself. But this is one of many possible formula that university can run. But I just want to pose it that if we stick to the old ways of running university in Thailand, it's probably risky for the long-term future.
I like the keywords that you say. The first one is to know who we are. And the second one, who is our key stakeholders, whether that key stakeholder really go for ranking, and then balance it in some way according to the context. Now, when you talk about this alternative school, then there happened to be one question saying that with the increasing popularity of micro-credentials and short courses, is the degree program slowly die? Or I would say dying almost right away too? Anyone like to be challenged of this question?
Sure, I don't mind going. We did when I went last year when I was back in the States, we did a study for a local university, a state university, public university, and they were looking at the threat from non-traditional educational providers. So, boot camps and, all the free MOOCs and all the different alternative providers. And we concluded that there's a very likely scenario of strong competition from non-traditional providers. On the other hand, we don't think that the degree program goes away, but it certainly becomes part of a mix of different educational strategies. So, it may be that there's a one-day training seminar, a one-week training seminar, like in a semester approach and a certificate approach and a grad certificate and we think there's going to be a much more varied menu of offerings in the future. And that absolutely have to pay attention to that. In universities, it will either adapt or there will be some deaths if there's no adaptation. How about that?
Yeah. Would you put it as H1, H2, or H3 for the horizon?
Probably H2. probably, yeah, H1, H2. I mean, it's not that far away. It's happening. The only reason I wouldn't make it a little bit is the university space, the domain is a very slow moving one. So, and it often, we've been talking about the, challenges to universities for 30 years, right? So I do think they're real and I do think they're coming, but I just noticed it tends to be a very slow changing system as a rule.
I see. Yeah. Anyone wants to jump in here? Or I could, Bang, please.
I totally agree with Andy. I think it depends on each institutions, whether they will be able to adapt to this future scenario, faster or later than others. But I think it's coming. And actually, I think this is a part of lifelong learning. We have been talking, it has always been in the educational discourse for a long time about lifelong learning. And this COVID-19 has played a major role as a catalyst in pushing us as an institutions to really look into how we are going to redesign our degree programs. I agree with Andy that the degree program will not literally be dying, like disappear. I think it will still be there, but it will be more or less like a hybrid. Within the degree program, you might be able to collect credits beforehand. You don't really have to register right now. You do the trial and error first, whether you like it or not. You collect the credits, and then if you already decide that this is what you really want, you just register as a student, then you get the credits that you took before. And I think if you look into it as a metrics, I think higher education institutions, we really have to think about this in terms of whether it will be a degree program or non-degree programs, standalone certificate or courses or training programs, and how it can be incorporated into the degree program. That is one metrics. The second one, whether it will be internal or domestically taught by institutions in Thailand, or it will be an opportunity for us to link up with other partnered universities abroad. So this is another metrics. And another one is whether it would be online or offline. I think these three can be mapped out in terms of matrices. And I think as an institution, we really have to think about these three dimensions all at the same time when we address the future of higher education, and also how we are going to take the opportunity of incorporating internationalization into these matrices. So I think this is one of the things that we really have to think about.
Yeah, actually the three dimensions happen to offer so many alternatives. I just wondered, Arit, would you come up with a startup college yourself, offering non-degree and experiences from the startups in your area? Because that would be very interesting.
What I think it could happen is that I think it hinges a lot on the requirement of the private sector. So these days we need a degree because that is a credential that the private sector would really need in order to prove that you pass a certain level of education as a standardization across, the world or the country, right? So if one day all the private sector agrees together that this certificate or this degree don't matter anymore, it means that the entire education system could collapse. But I mean, it's not going to happen soon. It needs the very, large umbrella agreement. I don't think it's going to happen. But if that happens, if it starts to happen, it means that the alternative university or the alternative school start to get into the mix, right? So, I mean, I think university needs to work a lot with the private sector and understand clearly, step by step, what are their current needs and what are their future needs. Because it can be very much as well possible that the private sector, if it's a conglomerate, it can start their own school and then they know exactly how to groom people, and then they will not need the university at all. So I think that's like one of the thinking that I just want to, post out there. I mean, everything is at risk right now. University cannot work with the university alone. They need to work with private sector. And then if it also depends on how the younger generation would choose their life in the future. If they choose that they don't need to go to apply for the jobs at corporate sector that require a degree, they can do the homeschooling. They can go to the alternative schools and they can start their own company. Why would they need a degree? Right? So these are the possibilities that we start to see it's happening already. That's what I see and want to share.
Can I ask one question? A very simple question. My curiosity as representing the university. What are you looking for as a private sector when you look into internationalization criteria or competencies of the graduates? Well, from the perspective.
It actually changed rapidly. It depends on the job function that we are looking for in order to produce the results that we want in the business world in the given instantaneously, like in instant global context at that time. The requirement change very fast, and it means that the static curriculum might not be the answer. Yeah, and the special seminar course that you insert in the curriculum is not the answer as well.
Why not? Why not?
It's just a small portion of that, because the last chunk of the curriculum stick to the very typical numerical knowledge or the arts knowledge. So it's very static.
So you want something that more dynamic and then responds to the particular time. The students will go out as graduates.
Yeah, so that is one more thing to pondering about. So if you are a management, Tim, if you are the owner of the company, who would you hire? If you have a very high power computer, you would hire someone who is able to control the computer, talk to the colleagues, manage the customer, and then can do the marketing for the company, right? So there's a wording in Thailand.
It's frozen. I think your connection.
Yeah. Is it better? Yeah. So it's called a duck. These people is called duck. So duck, pet in Thailand, means people who can do everything, right? So I think actually the younger generation would like to become more like a duck. So it can become a target of the employer. So does this mean that the specialists will be less needed?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Right.
But I mean,
because you mentioned mismatch. Would the term mismatch be valid in the future? Not the distant future, but maybe in the near future. What do you think? Because not mismatch anymore by the time they graduate, then they need to have the sets of skills to learn, lifelong learning, just like what Bang said.
Okay, let's put it this way. Me as an example. So I graduated as a chemical engineer, right? So this day I'm basically like a manager, like a GM, doing everything. I spend maybe less than 5% of my knowledge that I learned from the university level in order to do this job. I spend maybe 90% of the intuition in my blood to run it. I cannot say that I'm a successful person, but I can survive this environment. I can manage the team because I probably digest the content faster than other people, relatively. I can be more sharp because I was an engineer, so I can do the math quicker relatively to maybe another person next to me. But I don't really need the expertise of the specific subject in order to run this business.
Yeah.
Pretty clear. Yeah.
Basically, more of the soft skills, not the really rich technical skills anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
It also, but anyway, I mean, it depends on where you are in the organization as well. Yeah. If you are entry level, probably you need more expertise and less management skill. But when you climb up, you need less expertise and then go up to the management skills. It really depends.
Right. And there is one comment from Facebook. Kun Monrada Yam Kasikon said, during your talk, she said, I agree that the right side is urgently needed, which are challenging to develop youth. But for the left side, financial literacy is also missing in Thai education. What do you think, looking from your own self as a GM, and then also from the two from universities?
I couldn't agree more. Yes. But it comes down to the mix of the subjects in the curriculum. I mean, say for myself, because in the engineering bachelor program, it usually have the finance thing. So it has, I had no problem, but for, I think a last chunk of the curriculums, I think the financials related subjects are only the optional. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
If I could, if I could tie that point back to the previous one about the mismatch, in the other question about alternative non-traditional universities, the advantage that the non-traditionals have is they can change faster. When the marketplace says we need X, Y, Z, they can change. Whereas a university, as anybody who's been inside one knows, to change a course is multiple forums and, committees, and, we just don't move as fast. And that's a challenge that university, now there's a reason for that and there's a good reason for it, but it also is a liability compared to the non-traditional competitors.
That's true. Bang, anything to add on this point?
I agree with both. Yeah.
Yeah. And also this duck really has very little foundation on financial matter as well. So I think, and also looking at the COVID-19 situation, I think this has been one of the key factors why our economic situation has been downhill very fast because of our low financial literacy. Okay, Ben, you have any other questions to ask the two? We have about 5 minutes.
I'm fine. Totally fine.
Okay. From you two, looking into from as an outsider coming in, what would be the best thing that we could do now in Thailand for the current situation?
Well, I guess I'll go first. So I definitely would prioritize the virtual online new format issues that in the strategy. I think that a good future strategy is always resilient and adaptable. As the future starts to shift, we shift the strategy to be in line with that. And I think that is absolutely where the action is going to be for the next couple of years. And a little bit ahead of that, I would also be thinking about how do we take issues such as like intercultural competence, which we've identified as a key long-term need. And how do we work that into the virtual, which, again, it's tricky, but it can be done. But how do we take some of those other, I guess, other non-technical or non-virtual things and try to work them into that mix? So I think certainly focusing on the virtual online and then bringing in other aspects to that world and how do we integrate those things together? I think that would be my major thrust right now.
Mm-hmm. I think that is really crucial when we can really move and have the physical exchanges. Could we see some positive signals from the private sector when looking into our higher education at the moment? And in the future?
I think the private sector is really ready to work with the government side. I think any time I see that inside out from our conglomerate, we are reaching out to the government sector a lot. And I think we need to join hands fast, act fast, empathize the real demands in the market, and then formulate something that makes sense. We cannot just change a few words, cannot change just a few numbers in the target and then execute it. The COVID really changed things, right? It also needs change structurally. It needs change systematically. So I think private sector is really, really ready to work with the government and, you know, anyone actually these days. I mean, we need to survive all together. It cannot be just one sector to survive.
Right. Yeah, before I end this session, I think there are several keywords again. And the main one is a change. The word change is really big anywhere now in the future. And then 3 that I find very significant for us to go into the future. The first one is resilience, when I don't really see people talk and then do something that could be actionable. And second is what our public sector and universities have to care about, and that is the speed, because others are running so fast and we are still having our last. And the third one, what we have been talking a lot, but we haven't taken actions as much, and that is collaboration. So I'll end this session. Thank you to you 3. Don't leave us yet because Director Lakhana is coming here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope everyone enjoyed our talk this morning, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us. On behalf of the Ministry of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, and the Fulbright Thailand, I would like to thank you all for joining us today, and for our speaker, Andy Hai, Dr. Tharit, and Pang, and พี่พรทิพย์นะคะ I would like to end the talk with 3 takeaway questions from our speakers today. May I have the first question from Andy?
I'm sorry, you.
I would like to have the takeaway question from you for the first question to take away from for our audiences.
Well, again, I think it's the resilient approach to when you look at your strategy and say this part of the strategy is more relevant to the current context. And again, I think that is the move into the virtual, and how do we incorporate the non-virtual into the virtual.
Thank you. And then I would move to Dr. Nop Renu for one question.
Maybe it's not a question. It would be rather a takeaway message that I think that internationalization should be approached in terms of the culture rather than just a one-off policy. And I think higher education institutions who would like to approach internationalization more systematically would have to take the approach of using it as a culture within the institutions, both at home, activities at home and activities abroad. Similarly, they really have to be ingrained and incorporated into the overall strategies.
Thank you. And then Dr. Tharit.
Yeah, if I have to pose one question, maybe what are you doing right now? Is it related to the future, or is it help you getting ready for the future? So you know your answer. So let's be ready for it.
Okay. Thank you all for coming for joining us today once again. I don't have to conclude it anymore. It's very clear and very direct to our audience in both higher education and all sector. Have a nice day. Bye bye. Good night.
ครับ
สวัสดี
สวัสดี
ค่ะ
ค่ะกับคุณกันยีกับคุณแป้งขอบคุณทุกคน
สวัสดีพี่ทิพย์สวัสดี
สวัสดีค่ะแป้ง Go to bed Andy
Thank you.
I know yeah
มีข้าวแล้วก็
ได้แล้วก็